Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional level 2, the creator of SNAP, Survivors of Narcissistic and Abusive Personalities, and the owner of Claremont Mental Health. We are back talking about Succession on HBO that just won a bunch of Emmys, by the way. Great show. And I'm with my brother, Andrew. Hi, Andrew. Welcome back.
Hey, Mandy. I'm happy to be back to talk more about Succession and those Emmy award winners. Well-deserved, tremendous acting in the show, as we've talked about. But today we're here to talk about Greg the Egg. When we first meet Greg, he is kind of the surrogate for the audience, meaning he's someone who's coming into this world of wealth and billionaire status from a part where he is not rich. He's someone that's more like us that we can identify with at first.
Yes, and we actually see his mother in their home or their apartment, and it just looks normal, like a regular old apartment that they live in. And she's launching him off and saying, you need to go and find your family and get a job with them, this part of your family, and go for it. And so he shows up at the theme park for a job as one of the people that wears like a costume around.
Greg's idea of being professional at this job is to get very stoned. And unfortunately, he gets kind of attacked by children, which leads to him vomiting. It is a very funny way to introduce this character to us because Greg is the butt of the joke a lot of times. But he's also very effective, as we'll talk about. And as he learns how to make his moves, we learn how that system works.
Watching him navigate it as this fresh face with fresh eyes, that's our introduction into the world.
As we watch Greg, we see him make many moves throughout the show, his time in the first season in particular, and we see him change quite a bit. The first kind of move that we could say is him actually joining, getting a job at the theme park. But the first real move that he makes is introducing himself to the family and showing up.
Right. Entering the arena, entering the game, and, basically throwing his hat in the ring and taking ownership of that part of his identity is that I belong to this family.
He is Logan's brother's grandson. So he is the great nephew, I guess, is how that would be. Now, the other siblings, they call him Greg the Egg or Cousin Greg. Also, he is known as. So he has his funny nicknames, of course. But one of the characters that you're going to associate him with is Tom. And so his first kind of foray into this, the person who's going to lead him into, the action of all these, everything that happens going forward is Tom.
Yes. So that's another move that he makes is that he immediately starts to align with somebody that could potentially, move him forward in this process of getting integrated.
His interactions with Tom are very interesting. We've talked a little bit about him in the Tom episode, and they're very abusive, and we'll get into that a little bit. But, the big first thing that really Greg does that's the biggest thing is that he gets tasked with a job by Tom. He's there at Thanksgiving to, make his presence known as part of the family and try to join them, and he gets a big assignment.
Yes. Tom sends him to Waystar Royco to get the documents about the cruise line crimes and instructs him to shred them. So he does leave at Thanksgiving and goes to do that. But one thing he does is that he makes copies of a few of the documents and he keeps them. So that's a fantastic move. And in that, we see one of our themes, which is weaponizing information.
It's true. And we could even stack a theme on top of that because he was acting as Tom's flying monkey, and it's interesting because when we see Tom, make this move, as we want to call it, we see that he does have autonomy. He does have some intelligence, and we start to realize that maybe he's a dark horse candidate to win this whole thing. And that's kind of, his role, I think, a lot of times in the show is you underestimate him. But he is a flying monkey weaponizing information.
Indeed. As we've seen, these themes do tend to sort of cross over top of each other, or can be used in tandem at the same time. So yes, he's a flying monkey who has been sent to get rid of information, and he's retaining some of it so that he can weaponize it later. And little does he know that that's one of the best things he could have done, because it shows the rest of the family that he's here to play.
To your point, we see this illustrated in a visit that he makes to Logan. He goes to visit Logan Roy. He has to wait for several hours, all right? But tell me a little bit about this interaction that he has with Logan.
So he's sitting outside of Logan's office, which is, basically a wall of glass. So you can see that Logan's sitting right there, and, who knows what he's even doing, but Greg is just sitting and waiting and waiting. He finally gets up. Greg gets up or says something to Logan's administrative assistant that's there and says, can I go in now? And then Logan picks up the phone and says, send him in. So it was almost like Logan's testing him. How long will he sit here? How long will he wait? How long will it take him to speak up and say something that I'm wasting his entire day? But when he goes in there, it's actually because Logan had a problem with his computer and needed a young person to help him figure it out. So, who knows why he brought him in. But the reason Greg wanted to talk to him was because he wanted to ask for a transfer to a different department. At first, it seems like Greg kind of wants to protect Tom, as he's telling Logan, Tom is abusive at work. Tom fosters a toxic work environment. And then you see Logan's face kind of light up a little bit, like, oh, Tom didn't know he had it in him. Like he's impressed by that. Instead of it being like, well, that's not right, we need to fix that, and Tom shouldn't be treating people that way. It's, I'm impressed. So, he's telling Logan, I'm here, I'm ready to play, I want more, I can be of use to you. And so Logan sends Greg as a flying monkey in the next big move.
Logan's assignment for Greg is to watch Kendall. So Tom is going to have his big bachelor party, and we know that Kendall has had an issue with drugs in the past, and that's a place where you may find drugs. Logan gives Greg the assignment to watch Kendall just to kind of report back.
That allowed Greg to connect with Kendall. And then Kendall starts seeing Greg as someone that he can use and send off as his flying monkey. So essentially, first he links up with Tom. Then he comes to Logan. Logan sends him to Kendall. Kendall is sending him to get drugs, sending him to, So now Greg has become Kendall's drug mule and whipping post, whatever, but he's hanging out with Kendall quite a bit now. And that catapults him even further in their structure.
All of his instructions are conflicting as well. He's been told, hey, go watch Kendall, make sure he doesn't get in trouble. And Kendall's like, hey, go get me some drugs, bro. Which is obviously conflicting. And there's several times that this happens throughout the series where, the instructions he gets conflict with each other. After the bachelor party, we do have Shiv and Tom's wedding coming up. And there is a gentleman named Nate that's been flirting with Shiv, and Greg witnesses this, right?
Yes. And we know that Shiv and Nate are having an affair. Everyone is assembling for the wedding at the event point of the wedding. And they're there, a day or two before the wedding. And as everyone starts arriving, there's moments that you can see Shiv and Nate being a little handsy with each other. And Greg happens to see this. And he goes and he wants to tell Tom about it. They were having the rehearsal dinner. That's where Greg sees Shiv and Nate get handsy. The next day in the morning, Tom is taking a jog. And during that is when Greg tries to tell Tom, hey, Shiv is cheating on you. But Tom cannot accept this information. And he starts getting violent and telling him to shut up, shut up, shut up. And it's just very strange to see how Tom reacts to this news. But I feel that Greg was genuinely trying to help Tom in that moment as his friend.
This might be Greg's last honest act as like an actual human being in the show. Because as you said, he's going, to Tom as basically a friend would. And the reaction that he gets is violence. Greg realizes that Tom's not his friend, I think, at this point. Of course, they will one day become the Disgusting Brothers, but that day is not today. So Greg's big move of the season, after he has collected these documents, he's kind of kept that in his back pocket. He finally kind of busts out that whole card that he's had when he talks to Kendall.
Just like when Greg tells Logan that Tom is abusive at work, and Logan's like, oh, that's a very impressive thing. When Greg brings up to Kendall, hey, I've got these documents and maybe you should be aware of that, you see Kendall's face light up and calls him a Machiavellian little fuck, and like, hey, didn't know you had it in you, the same way that Logan was talking about Tom, like, hey, didn't know he had it in him. So it's like you've finally joined the family officially because you're being strategic, you're weaponizing information, and you are leveraging it. And so welcome to the family.
It's great. Greg, the way that he puts it to Kendall, too, is he says, well, I might be someone that you might want to take care of, like that. And it's such a timid way to, enforce this, weaponize this information quite literally. And what a great example of that particular theme. At the reception for the wedding, there is a big plot point that happens at the end of the end of the season, which is, of course, the death of the waiter. So Greg passes on to Kendall about the death of the waiter, tells him about it, and the staff is sad, but the general consensus is, we're going to let that ruin everything. I mean, it sucks he died, but we got stuff to do. We got good times to have, right?
Yeah. So that was another move that Greg makes, is that he informs Kendall. But of course, we know Kendall already knows that the waiter is gone, right, but he has to pretend like he's surprised. But just in how Greg conveys the callousness of this entire event is interesting, because he says, he's just sort of like filling Kendall in, like how everyone's kind of handling this, which is that the staff is sad, but we've decided we're not going to let it ruin anything. So, and now he is, again, big time. He's part of the family, is that not a real person. That person doesn't matter, right? Greg now matters. That person didn't matter, but now Greg does. And so it's all okay.
Yeah, Greg is now part of the clan in every way, shape, or form. And he will continue to be part of, the Roy family and make all kinds of moves to come. I really enjoyed him in the first season because he changes. And a lot of the characters in Succession don't necessarily change that much. Or if they do, it's brief flashes of change, only to return to the way that they always act. He's one of the only characters in the show that really has a true arc, and especially in that first season.
Yes, we see him develop into the person we say goodbye to at the end, and everything that happens along the way. We get to navigate this system, this dynamic, this toxic, abusive, narcissistically abusive family dynamic through the eyes of Greg. And you see him learn how to be more strategic. You see him learn how to, play his cards closer to his chest. You see him learn which person, he should align with and who he shouldn't align with. And when we first meet him, he's puking in a costume at a theme park. And in the end, he winds up being the right-hand man of a powerful person. And all he had to do was play their game. That's it. And recognize that it is a game, play the game, see how high you can go.
We also learn, throughout the season that Greg wants this badly. There's a scene where he is meeting with Ewan. He's eating with his grandfather in like a kind of crappy restaurant. And the next scene, he's eating with Tom at the nicest restaurant in town. One is a party. The other is kind of sour in demeanor, so we get to see how this turn to evil, as we might call it, is fun for him. And that's something that he really desires.
So even though he's full, he keeps eating to please Tom and to show, I'm going to be part of this. So he's like forcing it down. And that is symbolism for gluttony, greed, excess. And essentially that's what Tom is teaching him, is how to be rich. And you can just see him stuffing himself all day, and it's gross. But that's what they're doing.
But it's fantastic filmmaking. You know, it's such one of those, like, Succession doesn't beat you over the head with stuff too much. A lot of it's kind of subtle. A lot of it isn't subtle. This is one of those parts that's not subtle, and I think it's fantastic.
So next, the episode will be the sharks and the group dynamics. So when I say sharks, I mean Stewie, I mean Sandy, Lawrence Yee, Marsha. There are people that aren't necessarily in the family, but they're still in the mix because they're an executive at the company, or they work at, competing corporations that are trying to take them down. So you have the professional sharks, the corporate executives. Then we have the group dynamics of the family. So moving forward in our series here, we will divide these into 2 separate groups. But for our next episode, we're going to put them together. So we're going to talk about the sharks and the group dynamics all together, season 1. This is where it starts to get really good, because these people make a living out of being in this environment. They are there by choice. They're not family members. They weren't raised necessarily with the privilege of the Logan children. And they also have a different relationship with Logan than his kids have with him. So as we get to know the sharks and we get to see the group dynamics, the other family members, and how they are jockeying for position, it starts to get complicated, and we really start seeing a lot more of our themes and the major moves that people make to try to climb the ladder, get to the top, and see who's going to be the successor.
I'll be really excited to get, season 1 all wrapped up, and then we can move on to season 2. So that's going to be exciting. Some of the best characters in the show are among the sharks, in my opinion. So it'll be really fun to talk about that next time.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.